Hi everybody, I made an adult sweater for my dad. He helped me to buy and ship a Singer memomatic from Germany to the US, and this is a little thank you that I knitted with that machine. It's a size M and made out of superfine alpaca wool. I knitted it with a Singer memomatic, but my needle selection box didn't work. Most of it is Jacquard, the upper third is full rib. I have started with swatches and different test pieces to understand how the wool behaves, and then I started the project. I cast it on an industrial rib and knitted 146 needles. Before going into Jacquard knitting, I knitted one time round, and this time I mixed the brown and the grey yarn. And I will now activate all the needles in between. Like here, they're already activated. Here I still need to activate the ones in between. And do a full rip. Now I reset the counter. Switch to Jacquard, meaning press the Jacquard button and this button. Turn these knobs up. Stitch size 2. On the front bed, cancel all buttons. Push the Jacquard key, turn these up, these remain on 0, and I change to one thread. The brown yard is put on pause for now. For the brown blocks I simply noted down at which needle I start to put how many needles into position 2. Then I kept knitting Jacquard in grey. I'm at row counter 140, so far pretty everything eventless. Except on line 138, I had a major hiccup in this area to the right. I lost several stitches. What happened? My brown color, I should have cut it away, but I tacked it to the side and it caught up, and then it was too much yarn for the stitch size and I lost a few stitches. This is a Jacquard. I have no clue how to repair Jacquard, so I picked some stuff up and hope I caught everything. At row counter 240 I'm starting the transition into brown. So I move sporadically, chaotically some needles into position 2 so they can pick up the brown color. I'm starting to activate a little bit over 10% of the needle, in this case 18, and I gradually increase every 4 rows. I go higher, and then I go with 20 needles and I increase more and more and more. I'm at row counter 284, and meanwhile I need to activate 85 needles. In this case it's easier if I push out the needles into position 2 and push the ones I don't want back into position 1. It's critical, absolutely critical, that the stitch does not go behind the ledge, because if you push such a needle back you will lose your stitch. Meanwhile I'm at row counter 293 and most needles knit brown. Then I add 2 lines of solid brown and 2 lines of solid grey. The next section of the back has some solid blocks. Here you can see how I set the needles for that. By now I'm at row counter 318, do 6 solid lines of grey before I start these other shapes. For these other shapes I prepared an Excel sheet where I basically reflect the shape, and on the very top I have the needle count. So it's basically telling me which needle needs to be activated or deactivated. I use the same Excel sheet to plan for the writing for the text I'm gonna have on the front side of the sweater. At row counter 374 I reach the end of the colored area. I'm gonna remove the brown yarn, knit a couple more rows and then switch to a full rib. I switch to a full rib because it looks similar than the Jacquard, but it's easier to shape. Row counter 390, it's time to shape for the sleeves. To shape the opening for the sleeves, I need to cast off 7 stitches first. For the back, I casted off the full rib in a zigzag mode, but I found out that this cast off is way too loose and I did better on the front. I did likewise on the left side and took the needles out of commission. I'm now in the process to reduce by 1 stitch on both sides. For the first 4 rows I do that on every row, and for the following 6 rows I do that every other row. So this way I have an additional reduction of 7 needles on each side. And when I say 7 needles, I mean including their associated partner on the front bed. After I reduced a total of 14 stitches on each side, I need to knit 108 rows straight. By the way, if your weights hit the floor soon and your yarn is very fine, I found an interesting solution. I use this rail system, which you can get at Lowe's or Home Depot or so, and I clamp the yarn in between with some rubber bands. The rail system has holes to hang in weights, and this way I can basically get new weights without pushing any holes into the fabric. I reach row count of 502, it's basically 50 centimeters. I put the left half of the fabric on pause. Now we'll have about 20 needles for the neck shaping, and from there we have a slab of 37 needles to the shoulder. I'm not showing how I did that on the back because I did it not really a good way. I will show you when I do the front. So I'm row counter 509. I casted off most of the right hand side. I'm now casting off the remaining needles, and then I do the same on the left side. So the back piece is done. It turned larger than it was supposed to be. The rib is about 5 centimeters, that's okay. But then the shading begins at 33 centimeters, that was supposed to be 20. But when I put the finished product into the washer, everything turned out right as it should be. Then the mistakes I have in here. Down there I lost a few stitches because I didn't pay attention. Up here in the middle I lost a few stitches. And I lost a few stitches on top, like here where you see the yellow yarn. I may have recovered them decently, but the others I need to fix. Overall, I'm pretty happy. Looks good. The width is spot on. Was supposed to be 48 centimeter and it's 48 centimeter. The front is like the back except the neck area and that central brown stripe with the text. For the text section I pushed all needles into position 2, which means they knit brown, and I'm using my Excel sheet bottom up, setting the needles right to left. For every X I need to push the needle back into position 1, so it uses the gray color. I'm writing gray on brown. Ignore the X's on the side, that will be all solid brown. So I need to push back into position 1 at the bottom of the S, needles 48 to 45, and then again 42 to 40, and then again 36, and so on. So I set the needles according to the Excel sheet. That's the bottom of the letters. On the way back it's easier to set the needles. After you push the needles out, you will recognize where you had white, and you can just push those needles back. So you set your needles twice, going left, back going right. I'm now starting my second row and will go on until I reach the top. By now I'm at the end of the text area, and I will continue like in the back until I reach the throat. At row counter 389, I moved the stitches, the left 8 and right stitches, to the back bed and knitted across. I need to start arm shaping now at line 390. And my experience is if I cast off a rib with such a thin wool, it looks ugly. If I cast off a regular stockinette, it looks better. I'm at row counter 451. Carriage is to the left. And I need to transfer the middle 60 needles to the back because they will be casted off in the next move, after the next move. So I'm picking up the needles and transfer them to the back. I will first start with the left 8 needles and transfer them to the left, and then the right 8 needles and transfer them to the right. So the stitches are transferred back. I pushed, it's hard to see, those needles into position 2, so the stitch is behind the ledge, and I put the remaining needles on the right side to pause, because from now on we'll only work on the left side of the throat. I'm now knitting to the right. And will cast off those 60 needles that are basically the bottom of the throat. So it's casted off. I need to put my edge weight now onto this edge, put the thread back into the carriage and keep working on the left side. So for the next 7 rows I need to reduce 1 stitch on the throat side and put it back on, and I'll keep doing so offline. So before knitting right, I'm transferring the front needles to the back. To get 1 line of stockinette. The 8 needles are on stockinette now. I knit to the left, to the right. And put these 8 needles on pause. Plus I need to adjust the weight. Now I knit to the left and transfer the next 8 needles to the back. So the 8 stitches are transferred to the back. I put the needles into position 2, so the stitches are behind the ledge, and I'm going right again. Here you see the cast off line. When I did the back, I basically cast it off. I did transfer the stitch to the back bed and then cast it off, but it's still relatively loose. And I will try to hang the back to the machine and knit both shoulder pieces together at the end. But I'm not directly casting off now after the transfer. I will put them on pause after knitting a stockinette on top of it. So I'll do the front a little bit different. Maybe it works out better. I repeated this 1 more time, and now I'm transferring the remaining needles to the back, knit over it and put them on pause, and then we go to the right side. So all the stitches for the one's shoulder are on pause now. I'm taking generously yarn so I can cut off worst case. I can cast off worst case, and I do the right side. I need to turn back the row counter to 451. That's when we transfer, when we put the right side on pause. Rehang the weights. Carriage is already re-threaded, and I'm soon ready to go. So this is the front piece. The shoulder pieces still hang in the needles, and I have a choice to either cast them off or knit them together with the back piece. I'll try the latter. Since the front is hanging on the back bed, meaning the outside of the sweater looks away from me, I have to hang the back with the outside facing me. I have a stitch marker at the center and I try to hang in the center first. Doesn't need to be perfect yet, but I want to be close. So the center hangs, and now I try to get to the left side. I do this stuff off camera because I need full concentration here. Meanwhile, I think I got the hang out of it, so let me show a few. I push it out, get the needle closer, and simply pull it over. So both pieces, front and back, are now on needles. I need to now hang the weights correctly. So on the back bed, I pushed all needles back into position 1, making sure the stitch is in front of the ledge. I'm moving now up the front bed and we'll do a round knitting from left to right, from right to left, without knitting anything on the back bed. I'm now transferring the stitches from the front piece on the back bed on top of the stitches of the back piece on the front bed. This way I can knit them together. I'm pushing the needles into position 2 right away, just to make sure it's behind the ledge and knits easier. So now the one shoulder of the front and back piece are all on the front bed. The others are still on post, but eventually I will do the same with the right side and cast off everything together. So now I'm starting the sleeves. I casted on 65 needles, did an industrial rip and did my 25 some rows. I did my brown thing to conclude the industrial rip and start the Jacquard, and I'm now changing the row counter to 0. So I arrived at row counter 20 and I need to do the first increase by 1 stitch, right and left. So those two, get them one to the right. Bless you. So, and now I need to find something to put into that needle, and I probably try to use one of these in between lines here. This one doesn't sound too bad. So I do the same for the front bed and left side. Row counter, this is row counter 30. I now need to start the color blocks, and I basically repeat everything I was doing on the front and back, with the exception that I need to increase every 12th row counter row by 1 stitch. I'm not going to show all of that on video. This is how I set my color blocks. And I'm already at row counter 33. I should have increased at 32. I'll do that in 34 then. So I successfully reached row counter 389. I'm now starting the underarm section exactly like I did on the back and front side, meaning I start to transfer needles to the back before casting off, and then start with reduction, but then it will change a little bit. After I have casted off and reduced those 14 stitches left and right, I can keep knitting, but every fourth row I need to reduce one stitch on the left and on the right. This way I'm going for 92 rows. After each reduction I push the two needles into position 2, so they're easier knit because the stitch is behind the ledge. I forgot to take a video from the last phase, so my carriage was on the right. I paused the left 6 needles, moved left. I paused the right 6 needles, moved right. I paused left additional 3 needles, moved left. I paused right additional 3 needles, moved right. I unpaused all the needles to the left. I move left. Now as a next step I'm transferring the stitches from the front bed to the back bed. As to the needles on the right, I'm gonna activate and transfer them in one shot. I think that's a little trickier because I first need to get the stitch in front of the ledge, like this. Now I'm transferring the stitches to the back. Then I knit to the right. And cast off. I need to be careful, there's one stitch not fully knitted. But next step is casting off. So the first sleeve is done. I think color-wise it fits nicely to it. I'm not sure if the shoulder will fit, because if I align the underarm cutout and would sew it together up here, zip, I end up way higher than the shoulders. So if I put it here and would knit down, I'm about 2 inches further down than I should be. So I'll have to do some creative cheating and correct my instructions so the next arm gets better. So I'm sewing the arm to the shoulder piece, a little off center, because that's where I cast it off and left a long yarn. And then I basically, with my thread stitch, pull it tight and keep sewing along the edge until it's fixed. As I was sewing this stuff together, I figured today is not my day. I thought I knitted the arm together to be a round arm, but in fact I knitted the back piece together like an arm. Now I need to undo everything. But eventually I got done and I like the result. I think it's a beautiful sweater. Here are the instructions I created before and during the process. If you are interested, I can make it a PDF and email it to you.